started.
I make a motion to open the Finance Committee meeting for January 25th at 6:30. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? All those opposed? We'll go right down the agenda and then we'll go from there. Make a motion to move from the table, agenda item number 1, order that the representatives from MuniCode be invited into Finance Committee to discuss their outstanding account. All those in favor? All those opposed? This one we're going to have to table because they're asking for a different date, or they're asking for like that conference call we did with the Eco ATM, where we open up that way and they try and do it on a computer and all that. So they're going to come back with some dates. This one just really didn't work out for them.
So I'll make a motion to table it.
Second.
Can I just ask a question for
Yep,
that?
sure.
How much, is it the fact that we owe money for this, or how does that?
Well, I think it's, for myself, one of the reasons I filed this order was we're supposed to have our ordinances online up to date, and that's required by state law. The issue is it's three years now, Kevin, behind?
September 2013.
Yeah, so there's that issue where our ordinances aren't up to date, and actually, someone did email me on an issue and said, you know, I'm trying to look up ordinances with regards to a certain matter. Is this correct? And I was like,
I don't know.
no, it's not up to date. So with that, another question, when I was doing some research is, can we as a city enforce ordinances if we're not even up to date on our own online? That's kind of an issue. Some case law is back and forth on the matter. So for me, bring them in. The other issue is there's this ongoing debate as to a new system being implemented, and you know, we keep hearing about it, but yet we don't see anything about it. And then the question is, legally, is it similar to MuniCode in any way, shape, or form that MuniCode is going to come back on us? That's one of my biggest issues in order to watch out for. So,
All right, well, I second your motion to
Yeah.
table.
Can I,
Kevin?
I just wanted to make one point. I agree with the point on the copyright infringement. I think that could be a definite issue. The other thing that I think is concerning to me, and I think counselors need to be very concerned about, is the fact that, one, you're passing laws that have, you know, as you know, the specific wording of a law is very important, right? Many times cases, matters, and as you know, people sue us, whether it's a special permit, a zoning issue, or whatever type of thing. City council says no to something. Sometimes petitioners go to court and say, we disagree, this was the criteria, or maybe it's a resident who we granted, just take the opposite perspective, we granted the permit, and somebody who was an abutter or otherwise feels that they were harmed by that action. And then the question is, you know, and then they go into the specific wording of the ordinance, which is basically like a statute, and was it a 5-foot setback, a 10-foot, whatever the rule may be. The point I'm trying to make is these things have to be very precise, okay? MuniCode takes it upon themselves to make sure it is exact, and they are certifying that it is accurate, okay? So it isn't that this is just of a benevolent public good that we want to post these things online. We're also certifying that an independent reviewer of the ordinances has received them from the city clerk, testifies that they are in fact accurate, that was in fact what the city council passed. Now, to be cheap, the mayor's office is seemingly saying, I will have one of my aides write these things up as they come into us, and I'll put them on our own little home aid system, and we're going to make it like a MuniCode light, and we're going to save a couple bucks. So if the clerk, it looked like an 8, but she wrote a 3, or, you know, if it comes out with a 10 and it was supposed to be 100, oh, well, we're sorry. You know, that's the way it goes. And then when that's in some court filing at some point because it isn't certified accurate, and it's going to be, well, we had Joe the intern come in, and Joe the intern did it, and he's such a nice guy. It was an honest mistake. You know, like that's the new answer on the fire department, the 300,000 that we're over. It's an honest mistake. These things happen, you know, and that's basically what. Are we running that pathetic of an operation, or are we running a professional operation? That's what this boils down to. It's a slap in the face to the city council. It's a slap in the face to the legislative branch that passes laws that we need these things accurate. And the minuscule cost that this is, we're talking a few $1,000s a year that this costs to keep this accurate, to me is like, this is a no-brainer. And I have had from the mayor's lips to my ears to this city council committee said, I will put the money back, just ask for it. God strike me dead, that statement was made to me, okay? Where the hell is it? The money still isn't back, all right? This was all supposed to be taken care of in the last budget. This transfer is forthcoming, no big deal. I heard you, okay, you want to stay with Muni Code, no problem. I've been saying this, Brenna Murphy McGee has been saying this, and it's still not done. So we're going to have 52 meetings, and we're going to have Muni come in, and they're going to talk about the bill, and I appreciate that, that's great. This is solved very easily. Transfer from the mayor's office, put it in here, put the money, fix this problem, end of story, and we move on. We've had the Muni Code for ages and ages and ages. It also does all of our book inserts, which we have. So if you want not just the online version, but the written book version, nobody is going to replace that. You know, our green books, all of our leaflets, those are used. We have one of those publicly available for citizens if they want to know these things. This is available at the clerk's office. The clerk's office uses these. I rely on Muni Code constantly. I'm online, even though it's 3 years out of date now going on. I look at it almost every other day because that's what I do. I'm a legislator, and so isn't everybody else at this table. So, you know, we have a peanuts budget to run the city council, okay? The moment any other department in Holyoke runs with the budget that the city council of Holyoke runs, we'll be fine. Then people can start to complain about our little Muni Code budget. It's peanuts, and it should be restored, and I can't wait for it to be put back.
I make a motion to table it.
Motion was to table and seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? Next on the agenda, make a motion to remove item number 2.
Second.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Financial request of $3,500 from free cash to pay extra clerical help. And that is, here's the communication. I'm requesting new funds be approved for account such and such extra clerical help. I'm requesting funds for extra clerical help to keep our part-time employee who has been handling tax title issues. Funding this position is important for us in order to move forward with our auction and aggressive tax title collections. Sandra Smith.
Motion to approve it.
Second.
Is she here? No? Okay.
Oh, was she,
Yeah, I don't know.
do you want to talk about it more?
Is that Jeff? Is that Jeff
I
Burnham
was
that's doing
assuming
that?
it is. Yeah.
I mean, I know he was doing some of the clerical work, but
She's not here. I make a motion to table. I withdraw my original motion. I make a motion to table it.
I don't know if she got well, she should have got the invite. Ryan was,
Well, it's been online for a week.
yeah.
So I make a motion to table it.
Because was it cut in the budget for any reason?
no, we didn't. I don't recall cutting this. No.
Which then my only question is if it wasn't cut in the budget and we're trying to stick to a level funding mechanism, why would we add to it?
You know, probably Sandy saying, you know, there's more auctions or whatever. But you know, Sandy's very articulate. She could come in and explain. There's probably a legitimate, you know, it's probably a good reason she needs the 3,500. But you know, she should come to the meeting and tell you what it is. You know.
Yeah.
It's in a clerical pay line, so
Yep.
she's not asking for it for fine.
All right, so the motion is to table it. There was a second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Make a motion to move item number 3 from the table. All those in favor? All those opposed? There's a request for $5,000 from free cash to advertising. For fiscal year 2016, I'm requesting, I requested $10,000 for advertising. I did so based on previous year's spending. However, the budget was adopted at $5,000. As of today, that account is almost exhausted. I use several sources for free recruiting and advertising, thereby saving the city money. However, free sources are not always adequate, and therefore he's asking for an additional
Who
$5,000.
is?
Bob Judge from Personnel.
Can I ask you, this is a question someone's gonna ask you,
Yep.
how much do we have in free cash?
Free cash, well, that all depends. You have the 200,000 for overtime for the police, and then the 100,000 for fire. That's still in the mayor's office, but they have updated me that they have asked for it. If you subtract that out, it's I think it was like 196,000.
What
Put
about
200.
The school buses too.
Well, that's why they were requested to come. The mayor was asked to come. He sent me a email this afternoon around 12 saying he had a scheduling conflict, therefore he wasn't going to attend. Actually, I'll read it. Thanks for the email. I will not be attending at the meeting. This is from the mayor. I have another commitment and did not receive notice that until Friday. I am copying Councilor McGee so that he is aware. I will also make clear that I only pass on these requests for free cash to the city council when my team and I know that we have sufficient free cash available and to plan to make it through the year, to the end of the fiscal year with sufficient funds. This request is for the Hoyok Police Department for free cash has been properly vetted, and any further requests have been vetted as well. Counselor, I am available by phone today. And that was from Alex. For me, I'm not going to call someone when the whole committee has questions, so that was the intent of the invite. But, yep.
The advertising, is that for possibly for, or maybe the tax?
Well, I'm glad you raised that. It's a great question. Bob, I can tell you that just yesterday, Bob and I wrapped up the posting and all of that type of stuff for the tax collector position. We have already requested that the auditor position be advertised. I've asked him to, currently it's only being, to my knowledge, was being advertised on the website. I don't believe it's being advertised commercially out there in newspapers and elsewhere. I've asked that that occur. Secondly, he did say to me, now that we've completed the review of the job description as well as the position request form that I had to fill out, that he was going to start advertising the tax collector position. So whether $5,000 is necessary or not, I can't speak to that, but I can tell you that some advertising dollars are certainly going to be needed to get us candidates for those two positions. It doesn't sound like an unreasonable request. Presumably, there's other positions besides our two, but
Well, there's some postings already for, was it 3 for the personnel department, and there
Got
was
some
1
clerks
for
there.
the treasurer. My question back to you, Kevin, we requested the auditor position to be posted and advertised and to be an extensive search, not just the or the city hall webpage.
correct,
That was months ago.
correct.
If you're now just wrapping up the tax collector, which was only last week,
Right.
why can we wrap that one up in a week and not our auditor position?
I don't know.
I'm not saying you, I'm just saying, I mean, that, to me, something a little,
Well, the only thing I can say on the auditor one is I know that there was some discussion about waiting until after the election to see what happened to the treasurer election, whether it was going to be elected or appointed. I know that had a factor into some of the delay, but,
the election was over,
right.
the request was made.
I understand, yeah. You're right. No, it should have already been out commercially. I mean, he's got it on the website, but should be more than that.
That was my point that night. That was December. I think it was actually the last one, was it November? Whatever, November, December, that was asked.
We filed it, yeah, in November.
it was filed, and I said to amend specifically to put out in journals, what have you, to advertise for this position because we were having trouble
Yep,
attracting people.
agreed.
And one of the reasons why we're having trouble, which was the thought, was we weren't advertising correctly. It's now almost February. Tax collector's gonna be done within a week. This one still, for whatever reason, can't get done. Linda?
And I recall in the first round of advertising for the auditor position, it had never been advertised in the professional bulletin that Brian Smith had recommended, which was part of the reason, at least thought at the time, why we may not have gotten qualified candidates, because that is really where that pool of candidates would tend to be looking. And so we were kind of behind in the first place, and that seemed to be a critical publication. I can't recall the
Yeah,
exact
no, I
name
know
of
what
it.
I exactly know what you're referencing. Brian specifically mentioned that
Right, and I'm
periodical.
pretty sure Mr. Judge is aware of it, and that would seem to me to be the critical one to place it in, and I don't think it was huge money. The Springfield Republican is the one that charges a fortune, and it's limited as to how far it's reaching into the qualified candidate world, but
I mean, I understand you have to advertise, and my only problem is we're gonna approve this, and it still doesn't guarantee that we're advertising correctly for the auditor.
I will be happy to beat the drum. I mean, Bob knows that these are very important to me, and he says that he's going to do it.
Anyone else have questions or motion, Peter?
I just think that, the money's gone, and Kevin said he spoke for him. It's something, I'm sure $5,000 is a lot of money, but if it's not all used, it's gonna go back to the general fund.
Yep.
anyway, right? So I make a motion to approve this.
Linda?
if I can just comment, I'd feel a lot better if we were approving the money to pay a bill for the ads that actually got placed. I mean, some of you may recall that we've been taken to task for failing to fill the auditor position. It's a hard thing to do without candidates. And we don't really have control over getting those ads placed. I'd feel a whole lot better looking at a bill for the ad for collector, the ad for auditor, and then I'd know what we were paying for.
I don't think they can,
You're not supposed to incur expenses if you don't have
the
the
only one
money
that can do that is
appropriated.
DPW for snow removal.
Yeah,
The only
For deficit
occasion
spending.
that we can do that in.
you're not supposed to do that. We've actually said to the people in the past, don't spend money you don't have authorized,
They still do.
assuming the city council will adopt it later. Because just theoretically say,
Well, I take your point, but do you take mine?
Of
I mean, how
course.
many months are we gonna ask for this
Right.
and have it not happen while we keep giving 5,000 more dollars?
well, let's just put it this way. If we grant the 5,000 and it doesn't go to advertise these two positions, what do you think the gentleman's credibility is if he goes and spends the 5,000 on something else? You know? You're gonna have a tough time explaining that one away. So I think you gotta give Bob the 5, would be my opinion, and, take him at his word.
Okay, I'll second the motion.
All right, motion is to approve. It was seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
We, put forth a request with the approval that we receive a copy of the invoice for the ads
How about a copy of the ad?
and the
Hey, Joe.
invoice.
I make a motion to take item number 5 off the table.
Hold on one second.
Sorry.
No, no problem.
He did give me a copy of what he's gonna put in the thing on the tax collector. I could probably email that around to folks.
Right, but we wanna know that it was actually
Correct, yeah.
placed.
And the advertiser should give you that, yeah.
All right. Jimmy, you had a request or
Yeah,
a?
if you don't mind, if we could take item number 5 off the table,
Second.
skip 4.
All right, the motion is to suspend the rules, take up agenda item number 5. All those in favor? All those opposed? Make a motion to remove item agenda 5. All those in favor? All those opposed? Communication from the mayor regarding appointment of 2 brokers of record. And I think everyone did receive the emails from the legal department. on those who had applied for it, and then ultimately were selected. So with that, the order came in from Councilor Jardine, so I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Right. Well, first of all, I want to thank the candidates who were selected by the mayor for being here this evening. And this is really a historic moment in that this is the final step, if you will, in a new process that the city council created to just bring a little bit more transparency to one of these sole source contracts. As you know, there's a number of sole source contracts, selection of legal counsel, selection of towing contracts, selection of insurance broker. These are three of probably the bigger ones that the mayor has. Historically, these people have been selected, or in some cases unselected, by rather nebulous reasons. And so I wanted to make sure that these weren't political appointments, but these were truly financial appointments made in the best spirit and interest of the community. And therefore, the city council passed an ordinance, which is now embedded at section 30-1 of our ordinance book, which states that the mayor shall select the candidate or candidates to become the brokers of record, and that the city council needs to confirm and ratify this appointment. There was supposed to be a recommendation from the Section 19 committee. I found their recommendation kind of interesting. It really wasn't a recommendation. They basically looked at the four candidates, I believe there was four that ultimately applied for the position to be the city's broker. And they sort of just weighed the various merits and demerits, pros and cons, if you will, of each of the different candidates and talked a little bit about each of them. And the mayor ultimately decided to stay with sort of a combined approach between Dowd Insurance and Ross Insurance. And that's who has been the brokers now for, I want to say, last 4 years, something like 4 years. And so ultimately that's who we have. So I think it would be appropriate to invite them in and to hear why their selection, one, like what type of services are they offering, and why it's in the best interest of the city and its employees that they be selected as the insurance broker. And then we can talk about some of the other components.
If you want to come in. And just hit the microphone so that the lights up. Then name, address, company, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, excuse me, my name is Kirk Mackey. Home address? Is that what you're looking for, or our
Yeah, home
business
address.
address?
The
Okay.
company.
So I'm from Dowd Insurance Agency. I live in South Hadley, and what else were you looking for? I'm sorry, I only get the first three.
What's your title, Dowd?
Title.
Outgoing president, so I'm basically an employee benefit consultant is what I am, essentially.
Okay, and then
Steve Corbin. Just lean in here so you guys can hear me. Steve Corbin from Ross Insurance Agency. My title at Ross Insurance Agency is Employee Benefits Consultant, and I live in Belchertown.
start with Kevin, and then we'll go around.
Yeah, thank you. Gentlemen, could you just talk about the presentation that you made to the mayor? What's been your experience? You guys have already been in this position already. You want to tell us a little bit more about what services you've been offering, and why should the city come to reappoint you as the broker of record?
Okay, well, I guess, we've been doing this for, as co-brokers now for, I believe, 3 years, maybe 4 years now. And before that, we had the insurance for a little while, and they had, Ross had the insurance for considerably longer than that. And so at some point a few years ago, we had a discussion about merging our services, because We felt that we had enough talent locally to be able to service the city. And so that's what we've been doing. The types of services we offer are all of the full range of employee benefit services that a municipality would need. We have myself that's on the account, Steve's on the account in a full capacity, and we have another individual from my office, Nicole Miner, who was also involved significantly in this count, almost on a day-by-day basis. So the services we provide the city are financial in terms of forecasting and renewal and negotiating and that type of thing with the carriers. We also do a lot of, we interact, Nicole interacts almost every day with both the treasurer's office and Bob Judge's office on a lot of different issues, whether it has to do with the actively at work people, whether it has to do with the retirees. There's typically something that's coming up every week. As far as our capacity for experience, I've got 35 years of experience in the employee benefit marketplace. Steve is, he could speak for himself, but he's probably got 15 or so plus years with Blue Cross, specifically in the municipal marketplace. Nicole has probably 6 or 7 years of experience with us up at Dowd Insurance, but she had her previous experience included a lot of employment type issues and that type of thing, which is almost mandatory now in the world we're in. So between the three of us, we feel we've got a pretty well-rounded skill set that meets most of the needs that come up day to day, year to year. Steve?
Yeah, no, thanks, Kirk. So I just want to, Kirk, speak to a bunch of the things that we're already doing and some of the things that we've done historically. To kind of talk about, my background and why I feel that, this partnership works very well, and I think it's worked very well for the city of Holyoke over the past 3 years. Historically, if you look back 3 years, we've been able to maintain and keep the premiums relatively low, considering, what most municipalities have been up against. I think one of the things that we bring to the table is his ability to negotiate and partner with the Section 19 committee, who have historically had a role in the decision-making regarding benefits. And we've also had the ability to take that message from the mayor and kind of bring that to the negotiating table and to kind of bring all parties to a consensus and make the necessary changes that need to be made in order to keep those prices from skyrocketing. I think we all can agree that, healthcare is kind of, the hot ticket item. So we just have had a lot of, history in making sure we've been able to maintain that. Personally, myself, like Kirk had alluded to, I spent about 7 years over at Blue Cross Blue Shield in Massachusetts. 6 of those were as a municipal specialist representing Blue Cross Blue Shield with municipalities all of west of Worcester County. As a matter of fact, I spent 5 years as the Blue Cross rep for the city of Holyoke. So I'm pretty familiar with the ins and outs of the city. Again, negotiating and working through the different levels of decision-making that need to be negotiated through when you're talking about a municipality. A couple of the things you asked us, some of the services that we bring to the table. I don't have a copy of the RFP in front of me, but I'm pretty familiar with what our responses were to some of those questions. And we're definitely going to be bringing a few things to the table this year that historically haven't been in play. First and foremost, one of the things that we're currently working on right now with the Treasurer's Office is some ACA compliance items. We went out to bid for that prior to the new year. It's something that needed to be done, has to be done. All employer groups that have more than 50 employees need to fill out these tax forms, these 1094 forms that each individual needs to get to file with their taxes. So we went out to bid for that, and we got a number of quotes ranging from $20,000 to $25,000 to do the service. And all of the quotes required this, City Hall, the HR department, and the Treasurer's Department to do a significant amount of work. So what we ended up doing is looking at some of the tools and resources that we had currently that we were using for some other clients. What we were able to do is provide what I've called a DIY type option. The treasurer's office is in the middle of doing it. It takes a little more work on their part, but they're willing to do it because the option that we brought to the table was of no cost to the city. So that unto itself, and then providing the guidance needed to do that reporting and providing the ongoing support, was an immediate savings of $20,000 to $25,000 because the city was able to do that reporting itself. We're going to start working on a microsite for the city, for the HR department. We have some technology that we're able to put together. Like I said, they call it a microsite, but it's a offshoot of the HR website that'll provide all the employees with access to their employee benefits, everything ranging from their life insurance all the way to their personal health insurance. And then again, this tool, we're going to leverage it during open enrollment to kind of provide some open enrollment support. And as that starts coming to play, we can also spend some time, showing you the technology as we're developing it. I know part of the ordinance, you guys are going to have us back more on a regular basis, presenting information and data to you. So more than willing to, as that technology is being developed, to come back and show it to you. So.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great opening summary by both of you, and that's correct. In the ordinance, it speaks to getting regular reports. Obviously, this is one of our bigger ticket items, and so I wanted the city council to have access, direct access. One of the problems is that, and again, just from my tenure here is, and I don't want to, it's no slight certainly on your two companies by any means, but in the past, one of the other benefits of this new ordinance is the city council has direct legal authority to ask you for reports, communications as to how the funds are performing, and directly then be able to have data that we can use to independently analyze whether the health insurance fund is performing correctly, and to directly have the authority to invite you in to get an opportunity for particularly the finance committee to ask questions. So that is now in the legal authority. One of the things have you guys familiarized yourself also with the ordinance? One of the requirements, I want to make sure you're agreeable to it, is there is a legal requirement now to disclose the commissions that you'll be receiving under this contract. Are you familiar with those provisions?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so my question is, how much in commissions were received over the last year under this account?
A little over 133 for each company.
130, so about 266 cumulatively? Okay. 200. All right. So I'm going to ask another question. Thank you for that, by the way, which is approximately about the number I figured, so that number doesn't surprise me.
Yeah,
and that's in the, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and that's just the standard commission schedule with the carriers. It's nothing.
You want to walk, maybe just for who aren't familiar with the standard
Yeah.
is insurance, you want to just give us a rough overview of how that's calculated? I think it's a percentage of a certain amount.
Yeah, so the way the carriers work it is, they feel that you don't do as much work for you do the same amount of work for a larger account as you would for a smaller account. So they skew it so that, it's based on premium. Okay, so the cities, I think the city's 10, 12 million in premium. So what you do is you take your first, for example, with Blue Cross, you take your first 500,000 premium, and they're going to pay us 3% of the first $500,000, 2.5% of the next 375,000, 1.5% of the next 300,000. So you're talking about 1.1 million there. After that is 1%. So it's a graded commission. Okay. Health New England starts a little higher and they end up a little higher. They go from 3.5 to 2.5 to 1.5. So that's how it works. As you get out to $1 million, everything pretty much becomes 1% or 1.5%, depending on the carrier. But for the calculation, because it's graded, I think you can smooth it out around somewhere between close to 2.
2. Okay. The next question I'm going to ask you is largely because these sole source contracts are somewhat controversial, because the view is that these are people that are just political, fans of the mayor, or political people that are of the mayor, and that there's a number of, this is the whole issue going on, I'm sure you read the papers recently about the tow contract, right? The view is that you get on or off the tow contract based on how much in political contributions you make. And I want to first say that I think you guys have been doing a really good job. Everything that I could tell, granted I don't know the inner workings well, but I do know Ross Insurance is an excellent company, and I know Dowd is an excellent company as well. So I'll vouch for that, and I think you're providing, good services. But one of the questions I did want to ask you, and we did not put it in this ordinance because apparently we were not able to regulate this because apparently it's preempted by state law. But I do have real problems about anybody that's really receiving one of these sole source contracts making political contributions to the mayor. It just, in my opinion, does not look good. And so I would just say, going forward, I'd be really, and again, this is my opinion, is I'm not going to ask you if you've made contributions to the mayor in the last 6 months, but to me it's relevant and germane, okay, because of the fact that I want to always make sure that whatever decisions you're making, they're in the best interests of the city, okay, not in to design so that all the principals of either of your companies or yourselves, okay, are making donations to the mayor. And that, as a citizen, just concerns me, okay? Because if I see all the principals of an insurance company that's doing business, that's an appointment of you don't have to go to Harvard to put 2 and 2 together here, right? 500, 500, 500, 1,000, 500, this is what's alleged in the tow situation, that basically it's pay to play. You want the contract, you kick in donations. And the mayor can deny that all day long, but this has been not just him, but the allegation on these contracts in the past is, and if you go back, there's significant contributions that tail these contracts. Now, the good news is it's disclosed, so we can go to the finance reports to see who makes what for donations. So there is public disclosure. But I'm just saying is, I'm trying to get to a point where even if we can't regulate that, I hope we're going to create a culture that says you don't need to do that, okay? And I'm also going to get to a point where I want you to also familiarize yourself with the provisions of the agreement that just says the mayor cannot arbitrarily cancel your contract, okay? One of the other things that I liked about this is, yes, it put another burden on the brokers of records in one regard because it requires more disclosure and all these things. But on the flip side is, I did not like the past precedent, which is Mayor X, who comes in after Alex, okay? Why we staggered this is they can't come in on the first day, okay? And 6 days into the administration, they say, oh, insurance broker, X, you're just fired. And I've now reassigned it to broker Y. Why? I don't, no reason, because that was one of the concerns that prompted me passing this ordinance, was I had seen this practice over an extended period of time. So that is a safeguard that you also now have as brokers, that this is a 2-year appointment. I want the council to be aware of that. This is a 2-year appointment. It's about 6 months late though, mind you, but it got here. So I was patient with it because this is a new process, but I'm comfortable voting to grant this to your 2 companies. I think you're doing a good job, and I believe the commission is standard to what probably any of the companies that would be selected, they would get the same commission. The point that I always made about commission is, I used to get this stonewall answer in the past of, we ain't telling you, okay? And literally, I would get to the rail, I'm not telling you, okay? And then I had an answer, not from this mayor, but a prior mayor, that said, I don't even know what they're getting. I said, hold on a minute. You're paying somebody this and they're receiving this commission, but you don't know how much they're receiving. So all I wanted was disclosure on that, and then people can make up whether it's worthwhile or not. We're paying you for a service, and now the question is, you need, going forward, to show, as you have in the past, to show that you're adding value that is at least equal to this commission. That was always my point in all of this. But I think I've made my points. I'm familiar with your work, so I don't have tons of questions about your work. One question I did have is, do you still have the dedicated, I think it was maybe Dowd, that had the dedicated staff person for city work? Do you still have that position?
That's Nicole.
Nicole. Okay, so we still have that position, correct? Okay, very good. Thank you.
Any other questions for them? Peter, Jimmy?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for coming down, Steve and Kurt. Question I had, I'm a member of the wellness committee that started up last year, year before. Is that something that, as ongoing, we'll try to keep costs in check, through health insurance with your firm?
I mean, the long-term answer to that is yes, but, for you to expect to see anything as a return from that over the next 2 to 3 years is probably pretty minimal, for a couple reasons. A lot of times what you're doing today isn't really, you're not seeing the effects of for a couple of years from a wellness perspective. The second thing is a lot of the people that should be buying into the wellness program are the ones that aren't buying into the wellness program, and they're the ones that you really need to have in the program. So, I know we've made some progress because we're actually part of the committee, and we've actually last year we helped get started some of the with the gift card program there, with the whole thing there. We kind of jump-started that for the wellness program, and it worked out well, but a lot of times you see it's the healthier people that are getting involved with the wellness program, and it's the one, and that's kind of defeats the purpose a little bit of it, but it's a great program. You got the right people involved, and the best part of it is that, there's a regular monthly meeting, so there's progress you can look at and point to and say, these are the things we want to do, and these are the things you're doing. So it's a good program, but I just don't see you can quantify the any potential savings for the city, at least for a couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years.
My thought is, healthier employees, it's not gonna go to the doctor as much. Smoking cessation programs, eating healthy, exercise. And I know some things take time, to develop and to save. But I just think it's the city's on the right track doing that, not just employees. We have the police department, fire department that, healthier employees don't get injured as much, they're not lost time, you're not causing overtime, which is something that we're striving for, in the city. I think it's something that is important and is helpful in the long run, for
with the
health plan.
And Steve can, but the thing is, over the past 2 or 3 years in particular, the loss ratios on the city, I mean, there's some unhealthy people out there, and there's some people, typically, there's gonna be claims. What the wellness program does is it takes some of those claims that are avoidable, hopefully, in the long run. But the loss ratios have been high, which really means, that gives us less of an ability to be able to have carriers compete with each other, because, you take a year like last year, and, we only had the 2 carriers that we have that even wanted to bid on the business. So, that's where a program like that comes into effect is, if you can start seeing some trends develop, so that claims are moving in a different direction than they have been, then the program's working.
Okay. One more quick question on health insurance, and I know it's something that was talked about with the Section 19 committee. With the employees that are just one and, say, a spouse, are they still paying a family plan, one spouse and 5 kids as the same amount, or is that something that's looked at possibly changing?
We look at, you want to take
Yeah, I was
that?
gonna say, that's something that we've looked at annually, every time we present a renewal. We look at it many different ways. We look at it with an employee and then a family rate, and then we show it as an employee plus one and a family rate. Typically, the way that works is, from an insurance company's perspective, they just got to be cost neutral. No matter how you break it out, they get the same amount of premium every year. So what ends up happening is they run it through their underwriters and their actuary tables, and you end up really increasing the family rate when you do something like that. So to have a lower rate for the individual plus one, you really do jack up that family rate. So it's been something that every time we presented it, it wasn't a recommendation that the Section 18 committee wanted to move forward, to the mayor's table and have him discuss it, so.
Okay, I appreciate it. It just said some people that, are in that position or, contacted us about that. If they're paying $300 for a couple and it's paying the same as a family with 5 kids, sometimes it doesn't seem, fair. But sometimes the couple may be using health services just as much because they're older maybe and.
Typically coming from that perspective, you make a great point because when you look at it from a utilization perspective, when you break it down that way, you do find typically more times than not, those individual plus ones are the older family, the younger, the kids are out, this mid-50s and not retirees yet, but they are utilizing more care, and usually the bigger family, you got 3 kids, the relatively younger family, so what the care they're receiving is much less expensive, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for the very good presentation. And as I'm sure you're aware, the city's budget is pretty much based up of 2 things. One is insurance, and the second one's personnel. And so obviously we want to take care of the personnel, and we want to make sure that they have the best benefits available. We certainly want to keep and make sure we have the best personnel going. And so having a benefit of good health insurance is such a positive thing. My first question to you guys is, how much is an average family plan? You said there's 2 carriers, Health New England and what was the other, Blue Cross Blue Shield?
Cross Blue Shield, yeah.
So if I'm employee of the city, I have 3 children, a wife, how much would that be?
Geez, I didn't bring that information. I'm gonna say it's 1,200 maybe?
Yeah, it's wrong. I mean, that's something that, we could just be guessing on it right now. I don't have the information off the top of our head, but we can definitely get that back to you guys within the next day.
We typically see a single rate anywhere between 300 and 500, because a lot of this is all demographically rated. So you can see, depending on the plan too, so you get 2 components. You get the type of plan you're buying, and then you get the demographics over here. So, you could typically see anywhere between 300 and 500, depending on the plan you're buying and depending on the group you're looking at for a single rate.
That's for single, right?
Single rate, yeah.
So family's 1,200?
Family's gonna run you anywhere between 1,000 and 1,500, and I've seen it as high as 2,000 in smaller companies. I mean, that's what it costs these days.
Yeah,
City
that's my next question
subsidizes
is-
on an average about 70%, give or take a few percentage points, because they play with the percentage points every year a
Wasn't
little
it
bit.
1.50% or 51%?
As a family, but on
Yeah.
a single, they pay the.
I'm talking about family here.
Yeah, family is between 50 and 60. There's a couple of the plans are priced to encourage people to use them, so that you're going to get a higher percentage that the city is paying on those plans. But
So
you
each
take the
pay-
PPO plan, which there's relatively nobody in, it's 50-50 all the way through. Then you take most of the $500 deductible plans that are out there, and I believe that the split is 70% single, and then I believe it's between 50 and 60 for the family. We have a spreadsheet that we could give you. It's
So
got
I'm
all this
assuming if you say
information on it.
the PPO, that no one's on that one, I'm assuming that's the Blue Cross Blue Shield one. I'm sure
Well,
the
they're-
majority of the people are in the Health New England one.
Well, no, Blue Cross offers HMO and PPO, okay?
So 2 per?
They each, but Health New England does not offer a PPO, if I remember correctly.
No, they just offer the.
So you got, Health New England offers an HMO, Blue Cross offers an HMO, and then Blue Cross offers this PPO. And it's essentially for, primarily, most of the people around are people that are not living in the area anymore, not retirees, but, people that are maybe early retirees.
All right, so say if I'm an employee and I work for the city for 20 years and I retire at 55, how much will my insurance be from that point on?
For most people in the HMO, it's gonna be 50%. It's gonna be, well, they're all, on the active employee plan, if for a family rate, it's gonna be like 55 or 60% of the premium is gonna be
So that
paid.
doesn't go down? So as,
Once they get to Medicare, then it becomes a pure 50-50 deal. Okay, so
What's-
once they actually hit retirement, now you also get to that single plan too. So you're gonna get 50% employee paid and 50% spouse paid. You each got your own contract.
so that means you basically, because of health insurance, you can't retire like at 55?
No,
No.
no, you're not eligible for Medicare until 65.
65? Holy cow. Wow.
So you got some of these people that got that window that they stay in the active plan, and they're getting a better subsidy than actually they're getting if they're single than they're getting actually when they get to, the retiree benefits.
Now, when you guys negotiate with these companies, is there a way to negotiate? I'm assuming probably not because you haven't done it, but with the GIC, with the state plans,
We look at that every year.
is that what once was a worker at the state, I worked in the state, and my health insurance was next to nothing.
Well, so what we do every year is we take a look at the GIC amongst all the other carriers because it's an option. It's an option, obviously, we don't want them to participate in, but it is an option. So we have to be, we have to consider the GIC as an alternative because you can pull the trigger on the GIC, on a 6 or 12-month notice pretty much any year you want. So we have to consider the GIC relative to the benefits that they're providing against the benefits you have and the cost. The costs are all published, so you can get them right off the website. So then it becomes an issue of the benefits, which right now are not as good as the benefits that they currently have. But we have to be consistent, so we do use that as a negotiating tool with the carriers, because typically when we're looking at plans each year, we're not only looking at plans that, pricing plans the way they're currently priced, we're looking at some other options based on some trends going on, and then we're also looking at that against the GIC. So we're gonna get 3 different options to put on the table, and then we use the GIC with the carriers to be able to negotiate the price down.
What's the
because-
commission's schedule with GIC? Oh, 0.
Yeah, and to go back to the GIC, like I said, it like you were saying. it's
We
something-
can't sell the
Yeah,
GIC.
it's a
Oh, you can't
comparison. So,
sell it,
yeah, so the
okay.
GIC is the city goes straight to the GIC on that. The other thing to remember, as a city employee, as a state employee, the state was paying 80% of your premium.
80-20,
Yeah,
right?
so you're only on the hook for the 20%. So that would have skewed that as well a little bit. So not as rich of benefits, and they would be paying a higher percentage. And like I said, we really put together detailed spreadsheets through the renewal process. And a lot of the questions you're asking, like we don't have in front of us right now, but we do have the details that are going to really break it down for you. What's the best way to get you that information?
Probably email it to our administrative assistant, Ryan Allen.
Okay.
And that's rallen@holyoke.org, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what we can provide you is, we do some significant spreadsheets, as Stephen said, but it includes all the high-level data in terms of the cost to the city.
I was trying to think outside the box, because as Peter said, throughout the year, we might not get a lot of phone calls about it at one point, but we do get phone calls, and people bump into you at Stop and Shop, and they ask questions, and I'm trying to think of those questions right now that,
We really did put together a nice outside-of-the-box solution for the city this year. We were really up against the wall this year with negotiating with the carriers, like we alluded to earlier. The loss ratio, meaning, the claims that are being paid is surpassing, more times than not, the premium that the city's paying the carriers.
oh, really?
Yeah, on the Blue Cross Blue Shield plan, you're over 100% this year, by far.
That's interesting. How
Yeah.
about, we haven't talked about dental at all. Do you guys do that as well?
That's self-funded, yeah.
Yeah,
That's self-funded?
yep. So.
That's running well.
Oh, is it? Good.
Yeah, dental's that's a one that you have a known entity, you know where your cap's gonna be. But like I said, going back to the, kind of outside the box, one of the things that we were able to do was under the Blue Cross plan, because they didn't want to quote a dual option this year. As a matter of fact, for the first 2 or 3 months of our negotiating, they were really trying to walk away from the city. They were just a bad loss ratio. So what we were able to do is kind of negotiate with them, and again, like I said earlier, our ability to kind of have the conversations with the Section 19 committee and really have them see the big picture and have them to really understand, sometimes you do got to bend a little bit. But we did put together a nice little plan that incentivized the city employees to actually utilize Holyoke Hospital. It put a larger cost share in there for them to go to Bay State. I think if a city employee on this plan goes to Bay State, they got to pay $1,000. To go to Holyoke Hospital, it's no cost. So if they go to
No deductible.
yeah, there's no deductible there. And to further make it more beneficial for them, we actually put in place a plan that pays them reimbursements for the hospitalization. So if they go into the hospital, they'll get a check for $750. And so if they go to Bay State, they pay a little bit on that. The city actually agreed to pay a little bit of the premium, and it was actually far less expensive than to continue with the plan that it was. So
All right.
it really incentivizes use to a local hospital and save some money. And also kept Health New England's renewal down, probably about, I think it was about 10%, because to do a whole account with Health New England, their renewal is gonna be about 17-18%.
All right, those are the questions I had, gentlemen. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
I just have one quick question on the wellness, which I think is a good concept, but I'm wondering what the participation rate is and what the participation goals are for it to be really beneficial, since I think we also invested in a position related to that.
So we're not running the wellness program. That's Julia, okay? What we participate in helping move it along as best we can.
Right, but do you know how, the percentage of employees that are participating, or should we go to the board?
You gotta go to them. I mean, I could tell you that it's maybe 10%, and I might be off by 10%, but, you know, it's, but I do know that, you know, it varies by department, okay? So you might get more participation out of the fire or the police than you might see with the teachers, for example. And I don't know why that is, but I just know that that's a situation.
Right, but I do appreciate that, and I mean, we're just in such a situation here, it's good to invest in things that will end up making a return, but I would think we would need a healthy percentage of the people participating.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna get caught up in, you know, whether or not I think the position is worthwhile, but I can tell you the concept is worthwhile.
Right, so we just have to see if people are buying into it, I guess, is what I'm looking
Yeah,
at.
and wellness is kind of a slow roll too. It starts off, it's one of those where you gotta stick with it, and you gotta have somebody championing it at the city level and really pushing it forward. And then you'll start seeing the difference, but it is one of those things that you just gotta stick with it.
Well, the other thing too with the wellness is with the partnership that they've got going on, and I can't remember the name of the whole thing that's got with the Holyoke Health Center and the Holyoke Hospital and that conglomeration, you know, they're starting to create some really nice, in the YMCA, you know, they've got a system now where, that's working, where if you get somebody that has, you know, a type 2 diabetic, before they
If you can get the buy-in, I mean,
right,
that's the key.
but the thing is they now have a system where, you know, if they go get the gift card to take the screening, and they find that something's wrong, now there's a situation where, you know, you go to your doctor and your doctor sends you over the Y does something for you to get you going, it reports back to something. There's a system going on here now that's kind of in its infancy, that if you give it the time to mature, I think it's gonna be really good for the city in the long run, regardless of the cost of what it might save in cost for the city for premiums and that type of thing. I just think it's a good thing. One of the biggest negatives that we heard 3 or 4 years ago was every time that they tried to do something for a wellness thing, it got off to 3 or 4 meetings and then it just fizzled out. Well, this one hasn't fizzled out, and I think that's important to realize.
Thank you.
Okay.
Joe?
Thank you, Tom. Kirk, Steve, welcome, and you've answered a lot of my questions, and I certainly commend you for the knowledge that you brought here this evening and what you do as for your companies as what we call brokers. But you know, I think it's important. Kevin made a point, and I get it, and I understand it's important about the campaign contributions. You know, we probably had a system once that led towards the victor came to spoils, and we don't want to see that. And I also understand we can't regulate that because whether it's Ross or Dowd or Bresnahan or Bergman or whatever Holyoke family that owns an insurance company, they have a right to participate in an election too. But I think the ordinance helps with the transparency, but I also think the Section 19 committee helps a lot. It has changed the way we do business, and I think in a good way. So my thoughts are in twofold. To describe how you work with the Section 19 committee, and it's not always about affordability. I think sometimes it's about the product that their membership wants and needs, as whether it's a young family or an older employee. And two, you touch base on the city's portion versus the employee's portion. And until we had the discussion, you know, until I think the Section 19 committee had a discussion, there was never a 70% option. It was always 50-50. And that is what killed what we paid as city insurers. And at one time, and I'm not too sure, we're not still the lowest municipality in the Commonwealth when it comes to percentage that the city pays for their employees. I'm not sure if you have the answer to that, but I'm pretty sure it's still there.
I think it's, with some of the changes they've made recently to move that percentage up off of the flat 50-50. I think City of Holyoke's actually, City of Chicopee, last I knew, was fairly close to the 50-50 percentage. There are other municipalities that have come closer to that, but you know, a lot of them started at 80-20, 90-10, and I've seen that in the past with some regional school districts, paying 90-10 on some of theirs. So I think for the city, it's actually a little more in line with what you're seeing in in public sector. In private sector employees, but it's not. It's coming more commonplace to get closer to the 50-50 on at least one of the products. If a PPO plan, one of those where it's a high costing plan and you want to just, sway your enrollment into one of the more affordable plans that provide, maybe a smaller network of coverage that meets the needs. But to talk to, the other question regarding how we work with the Section 19 committee, it's definitely an ongoing partnership. We have open lines of communication. I know during the renewal process, which seems to last 10 out of 12 months of the year, and we're meeting with them on a monthly basis. I know more times than not, Kirk is hosting them over at Dowd. We have the technology there to do the presentations, and we'll bring the carriers in on multiple occasions. So I'll let Kirk talk to more of that.
So,
as well.
the Section 19 committee, I think we have as good a relationship with them as you can have with the Section 19 committee, because
You sound like the city council right now, Kirk.
well, I've been listening to you guys all night now. No, but the thing is, you talk about affordability, and that's what it is for those guys, that's the bottom line we're in the private sector more than we're in the public sector, so we see what people have to come up with to pay for their insurance. So, we know what they're talking about. We know, the difference with the private sector is, you have people that probably are making a better paycheck. So, maybe you can say that there's a little better affordability issue. The benefits are a big part of the compensation package for a municipal employee, and we understand that. And, costs go up. So it's a challenge for us every year to try to figure out how we can keep that back in the affordability range. And, and then you got City Hall that's telling you this is the number that you're going to be able to use. And so you got Section 19 is working towards the benefit package, and, the City Hall is working towards keeping costs at a specific level. It's a challenge. I think we have a very good relationship with the Section 19 committee. When we do the open enrollments down at Holyoke High School, to me, that's the best part of the job, because I run into people down there I haven't seen in 40 years down there. But that's the best part of the job, because people come up to you, they ask you, and I think that's one of the value added that you get from having two brokers from the city, because we know the people that are coming in the door, they sit down with us, we talk to them, and then they leave there, and that you help somebody out. And I don't know that was the case. That's always been the case, but it's a good feeling for us. To go back to your question on the contribution formula, I've seen some of the other municipalities locally. I would say that they're probably paying, maybe 10 or 15 or 20% higher in some of the communities. But that's, a lot of those communities are in a situation where they can't back out of those commitments that they made so many years ago that quickly. They can't go from 75% down to 60% without having a revolt. So I think that, wherever we've got to in the city of Holyoke, it's been systematic. And so I think the contribution formulas, they've improved since we've got here. So I can only say that I think things are in the right direction.
Well, thank you for the answers this evening, because I think they were right on mark, and also for the for working hard, especially with the Section 19 committee. but knowing all sides of the story, and we recognize it and appreciate the efforts.
Thank you. Kevin?
One follow-up question, and that was on converting the employees over to Medicare. That's been going on for a few years. Can you just kind of walk us quickly through that process? It's, because as I understand, you'll have an employee, say, retires at 60. You know, I have my X percentage that I could get. I'm now, 5 years later, I'm 65. They get a letter in the mail, says they're being converted over to Medicare, and then what becomes the cost to the city? Do they have, this becomes, because I'm told this is a really tremendous savings for the city by converting them to Medicare.
Yeah, it was about 4 years ago that Massachusetts adopted the law where everybody that was eligible for Medicare in a municipal plan had to take Medicare. Okay, I think it was section 18A or something like that. But, so what you had was you'd have people over 65 that were eligible, and they would be looking at the medical plan, and they would say, why would I want to take a 50% contribution on a Medicare plan when I'm getting, now remember, there's a single plan here.
Right.
When I'm getting a 70% contribution on my single plan over on the active side. And all my loss ratios at my age are now going against the city's loss ratios. So now you take that person and you're paying 50% out of a much lower number, okay? Because the MedX cost is about 400 per individual per month, so 200, as opposed to, the other one. You get a full indemnity plan, no deductible, so it's a great deal for the employee. But Massachusetts adopted that once you're 65, you have to go on to the Medicare plan. And that was great because for a few years there, the Section 19 committee was kind of in a little bit of a turmoil as to whether they should pull the trigger on actually adopting that themselves, and there was just too much bad feelings going on to be able to do that. And then the state came in and said, this is what you got to do. So I don't know the exact, although Nicole would if she was here, I don't know the exact methodology of when somebody turns 65, what the process is, do they get a letter, that type of thing. All I know is they do, and I don't know who they get it from. I'm assuming it's probably Kim. And then they just, the system's set up where they just automatically go onto the Blue Cross Medicare now. And if the spouse is under 65, they stay on the active plan.
In some of the information you're going to give us, maybe you could get back to us on that. And I'd also be interested to know the volume, sort of like how many people currently have the H&E, HMO, the Blue Cross, sort of like the buckets. Like how many are on Medicare?
Active or retirees?
Both, actually, if you could divide that out.
So the spreadsheet we're going to send you has every plan with all the participants in each plan.
Okay.
It has the rates, has the annual cost for the city, it has the annual cost for the participants, and it has a weekly or the payroll cost too. So.
Okay. And you're going to give us the compare of how we're performing now versus GIC, correct? I think that was one of the questions we had.
We
You
do that
said
every
right now we're
year.
doing better, so you review it like once a year to see how we perform versus GIC, correct?
Well, all it is a rate play because the GIC, there's no relevant loss information there. You're now pooled with all the other people in the GIC.
Well, I guess what the city, from our perspective, we'd be looking at is what would be the cost to us
we
to
provide
fund
that-
this system versus what would it cost us to be a member of GIC?
We provide that. So all we got to do is we've already done that, so all you need is a copy.
All right, yeah, so if you could just give us that information when you get to it, yep. Thank you.
All right, with that, any other questions?
Just
Yeah,
real
Joe?
quick, I'm not sure if I heard that right, but I don't think we can get individual employees' names directly tied to their choice.
No, we wouldn't give you that, but we
No,
give.
we're talking like, like there's 50 retirees on this. There's no names. We're just looking at the
Okay.
the aggregate data.
I heard it wrong, I'm sorry.
No, I
Oh,
don't need
we
to know
give-
what
we give
what
out
Joe
social-
McGivern's particular plan is. I don't need
Give
to
out
know.
social security numbers, but no names.
GIC.
All right, with that, is there a motion?
Make a motion to, is it just comply with?
No, that you'd have to vote to confirm the appointment of these two firms as the broker record.
The motion is to confirm the appointments. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Confirmed.
Thank you, gentlemen. See you Wednesday morning. Yes, you will.
Thank you.
just finish writing this up.
I'm abstaining from number 5,
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
Motion is to take up item agenda number 4, which was actually it was referred back from the city council, so motion removed from the table. All those in favor, all opposed. This is the 200,000 from free cash to overtime. Everyone did receive a copy from Ryan for the overtime allotments. And like I read the email from the mayor, he's not attending tonight. I did reach out to the school department as well as Chief Pond. He had a conflict in the sense of he was graduating from a certain class tonight, and his wife was having a party for him, so really couldn't make that. But he was the one that alerted us to the issue of the shortfalls in the fire department, which was done by his department. They were the ones that were doing the internal audit and discovered the shortfall of, I think it was like 7 employees, which represented the requirement for funding to get them through the year, which, as we all know, that was funded through a grant. So if we didn't do that, we'd have the state on top of us. So they're not here to answer some of those questions. Councilor Dordain brought up an issue with the school department, which they may have a shortfall as well. So with that, we bring the chief back on. Chief, 200,000 for overtime. We did receive the list of employees and who's receiving what, whether it be for court overtime or regular overtime. And with that, I guess I'll turn it over to you to see if you have anything else to add before we get into questions or anything.
Good evening, councilors. Thank you for having me here tonight. I just want you to understand that we have made cuts over the years. I realize the police department's budget is expensive. Most of my budget is personnel costs. If I could just bullet through different things that's transpired over time, that may understand. So, there was a point in time when we had our shift lieutenants on a Monday to Friday schedule. We moved them back to a rotation schedule a few years ago to try and save some of the costs that are associated with that. We used to have 3 court officers. We've reduced to 2 court officers to try and save some money. We were looking at ways to get additional funding to the city, even though we're not a funding revenue, so to speak. One of those things we did was we increased the tow fee for cars that the police gets from $10 to $20. We also looked at the automated way to get copies of accident reports through Get Crash Reports that insurance companies and law firms access now to return money to us. And then we've, over the course of my time here, we've reduced the Office of Internal Affairs or Professional Standards, where there used to be 2 bosses, now there's only 1. We did institute community policing. At one point, it was a lieutenant, 4 officers, and a code enforcement officer. That has been scaled back. We've lost, now it's a sergeant and 1 officer. We lost the other 3 officers. We lost the code enforcement officer. We did start a traffic unit on days and evenings. That, over the course of time, that scaled back to just days, and then not at all. Only when we have extra manpower can we do that. And we've looked at utilizing reserves and hiring reserves where we didn't have reserves before to try and plug some of the holes. We have made cuts over the course of time. We had tried to make adjustments. My budget, last year we spent about $12,236 is what we spent overall. This year I was budgeted for 12, which is 236, 237 less. I'm looking for $200,000 to get to the end of the year. As we've been doing this for the past 4 years or so, my budget, everyone knows, is never fully funded, and I come back for expenditures, and that's why I'm here today.
With that, other questions? Linda?
Thanks. I want to make sure I'm understanding this Excel spreadsheet that you sent correctly. So if I'm looking at the last payroll period through which you sent the figures and I'm comparing to the 2015, it looks to me like it's about the halfway mark, so that if I double these figures, I would get an annualized number. And if I do that, it looks like the overtime's running the same or a little higher than last year. So I just want to make sure, I don't want to assume if the numbers aren't what they appear to be.
Thank you for bringing that up. So, if I understand that correctly, where we've spent as far as sworn officer overtime, we're at, what is it, John, like 507?
Correct.
At this point in the year, where last year we were at 520 at the same time frame.
If I can just clarify my question, maybe. I'm looking at a grand total that says 563,995 compared to a grand total that was 1,044,718.
Yeah, and I'm
So are
trying to,
those, am I looking at the right number to number? Because if I take that, then the total's higher for this year than last year.
right, so last year we spent a little over $1 million,
Right.
and this year I'm hoping to do better than that. You're looking at taking a number where we are and doubling the figure. I'm trying to put some stopgaps in to slow that down. So we're not there.
Well, all we have to look at is what
If I may,
is. I mean,
if I may interrupt, you might be confused of what he said. By meaning better, I believe he means reducing it from last year's numbers,
Well,
not better.
right. So I am looking at the correct numbers then, that if we stay at the rate we're at for the rest of this year, based on what we've done in the first half of the year, we're running ahead of last year, not less than last year. So my request at the last meeting was to understand what the particular plan is to change that projection between now and June. And I mean, I understand some of the changes that were made in positions, but it doesn't seem to be translating into a change in overtime yet. So maybe if you could specifically help us understand how what's looking like 1.127 is gonna look less than $1 million, I guess that's what we need help seeing.
Certainly. So what we're looking to do is shift some personnel services, some personnel now, to try and stem some of this. Add a little bit of supervision to the day watch, which sometimes creates overtime. I'm looking to take my community policing unit, what is left of it, and flip it back to patrol completely, which adds some supervision and adds another officer. When we have extra manpower, we'll man it. When we don't, we won't. And then I'm looking to move some other resources, potentially adjusting work hours to make some savings elsewhere. That's step number one. Step number two would be, we're going to start looking at, I believe Captain Duguay has sent you something, Councilor Jordan. We're looking at a few other things. One of them is ordinances on motor vehicles. There are a couple other things we can look at. We're not quite there yet. It really is going to be hinged on what I get for resources or don't get for resources. A couple other things we could potentially look at down the road is really we look at our calls for service. We look at what we currently send an officer to. I know there are some jurisdictions that don't send officers to stolen car reports. You got to come to the police department to make it. We could, just trying to save some. We take a look at missing persons. Can we do that over the phone? Auto burglary. Don't send an officer. Take that report over the phone. Just trying to make some savings. It's not going to fix everything. Another thing we want to examine down the road is looking at our false alarms. I know we have an ordinance. We do our best. but the reality is, we respond approximately a little over 3,000 alarms a year, which is a significant amount of manpower. I've had some correspondence with some other chiefs and retired chiefs in the alarm industry, and they do have some best practices to look at trying to reduce that. Part of that is through ordinance, part of that is through fine, part of that is through notification. I'm throwing this one out the air, would be, we've been to your location 4 times for false alarms. We're notifying you now, we're not coming anymore. Again, depending, you tell you correct this behavior. We're not. So industry standards try to reduce that number. We reduce that number, that gives us more manpower available.
I thought there was a rule on the books that if you went more than once or twice, then you could charge a fee to the company if, so that you could just be billing that out to cover the costs. But is it a big enough fee to cover costs of sin?
Yeah, yeah. I'm helping to do,
I thought we had that on the
yeah,
books.
and there is an ordinance there, but in practice or application, it isn't working very well today. What I'm trying to do is get together a package that, with that, would beef that up, and quite frankly, the goal would be just to reduce the number of false alarms that my officers respond to. Personally, me, none. Oh, no, what, yeah, no, I can't speak for that. No, I can't speak for that. I think we send notices, but the reality is, I don't think it has any teeth, but we'll take a look at that. So we'll look at that very issue.
Yeah, Linda.
So, given what you've said about the changing positions and the shifting around of this and that, what's the dollar figure that goes with those shifts for bringing this number that's projected out at the 1.12 over to below $1 million?
Well, when I ran the numbers earlier, if you bear with me a minute, I'm projecting spending, if I make some of these moves, approximately $830,000 this year.
And at this point, you're at 564 roughly.
Correct. No, no, John, you're confusing 2 numbers. She's using the numbers that Katie provided to her. Which includes like 55,000 or so with civilian overtime. You're looking at the sworn number.
I don't have any further questions at
Okay.
this point. Thank you.
Anyone else have questions for Chief? Kevin?
Yeah, Chief, when we see this big number of $1 million something, one of the conversations that we had at the last finance meeting was that it's like 500 and something is actually what citizens, taxpayers are paying. The rest is all these other jobs, the various road jobs or different contracted overtime, correct?
Well, I wouldn't say it's road jobs, but we put grant money into it. There are other funds that go into there, yes, and we've done some transfers.
What about things like, ISO New England, for example? Is that included in that
No,
number?
that is not.
Okay. So, all right. So, so conceivably, we don't have the full picture of how much overtime there really is then, because we don't know all that. Those are paid at overtime rates, right?
No, that's paid at, the patrolman set that rate. That's 42 hours an hour, I believe.
Okay. Was there a contract that specifies that, or?
Yeah, the collective bargaining agreement says this patrolman set the rate. It's $42 an hour.
They're like an ISO New England?
For extra details.
Extra details, they call it, okay. All right. So when we say it's $1 million something, that's all overtime, but you said some of it is covered by grants.
That's correct.
So you're saying half of it is covered by grants and half is covered by,
I wouldn't call it half, but.
well, what percentage then?
Well, I'll give you an example. So, last year, we put some PSAP money in there. We've used, when we had staffing shortages, we've transferred money in from staffing shortages. When we're, I'm funded for 90 officers, right?
Yep.
Last July, at one point, we went down to 82 officers. And then we went down to, with injuries and a leave of absence, we were down to like 79 officers. So there was a savings there. And we would move that type of money in to cover that. Now, the downside of running that short is if you go back to last summer, I had officers being held over quite a bit or forced to work overtime, which is a real morale killer. I'd like to keep my numbers up. We're at 90 right now. I was once asked what would be the optimum number to really cut back on overtime. The optimum number would be 98. I don't have 98. I make do with what I have. We try to provide the best services, what we have. I appreciate the support that you've given me in the years and in the future. I realize the city's back is up against the wall. I get that. We've made cuts. We're looking to make more cuts.
Right.
We're looking to make more transfers. I understand all that. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to whether you provide the funding or not. And that's clearly your call. I get that. You're the fiscal responsibility for the city. I understand that.
Yep.
I understand that the city's back's against the wall. Right. I'm trying to get through the year. We've made a lot of good improvements in the 4 or 5 years that I've been here. I think we've gotten some historic low crime numbers.
Yep.
My officers work hard every day. I'm very proud of them. I'm proud of what they've done. I do think we've turned a corner, and I'd like to keep moving in that downward trend. If funding isn't provided, then I'm just going to have to shift other resources to cover shortages, and that diminishes our capacity to deliver services.
Do you think it would be helpful, do you feel you have the skills internally, and this is no slight on you, of course, but just that maybe this isn't your expertise, in terms of should we bring in an expert that could help with the deployment of the officers? Maybe there's a national consultant, or maybe we pay somebody $50,000 to help with, making recommendations or give a report to review the internal workings of the department. That, they have a lot of these experts will go in. You see them, they frequently go into some of the big cities, New York and otherwise, to review practices, and then they'll review the contracts, and they'll make recommendations for management to do an independent audit and do an independent review to see, would that be helpful to you?
No, quite frankly, I think we're doing a great job with the resources we have. I've been in this profession for 34 years. I understand policing. I understand the budgets. I'm in budget process, and here we are.
Okay. All right, it's just that, what we're looking at is, it seems like we're struggling to stay on budget, and I understand that's a chore. But the reality is you're at $12,238,000, which was your funding from last year. And I just wanted to have one question, which is, will the 200,000 exceed that threshold or not? That was a little left up in the air. I was told to go, I guess I had to check in with the auditor. But does it seem like that's basically what we're on track for? Because if that's what we expended last year, $12,238,000. And I want to make sure we're on pace to stay with that number. Does that seem like where we're at?
Well, we're at 12 million right now without the 200,000.
Okay, so then the answer is yes. So, which is good. And you're anticipating this 200,000 is the only other infusion you need into the department for the remainder of the year?
No, it is not.
Okay, what else do you need then?
We know our motor vehicles are a little bit tired, so to speak.
Okay.
It took a little while to replace the cars.
Yep.
So our expenditures to maintain just the motor vehicle supplies.
I generally don't count the capital as,
I know, but what I'm budgeted to repair the cars and keep them running is what I'm getting at.
okay,
I'm gonna be short about 50,000.
okay,
We had 3 unexpected or additional retirements that we hadn't budgeted for. We've talked to some people about how to, employees about splitting up the payment potentially, that sort of thing to ease the burden. I'm gonna need, right now, it looks like, unless something changes, an additional 168,000 there.
Okay, and where's that proposed to come from?
I'm sorry?
Where, I assume you're in daily conversations with the mayor. Well, what's the proposal to take, where are we gonna get those funds from?
My conversations with the mayor were that,
What's his proposal?
there was sufficient funding because, that I had these items coming forward. I can't speak for where the fire department's money is coming from, but I'm told they've identified a funding source. I've been told about the,
Not free cash, some other funding source other than free cash.
so,
Well, it ain't gonna be stabilization, I'll tell you that right now.
that's not the funding source I'm told, but I don't,
Okay.
I can't speak intelligently about that, I really can't.
Okay, so 168, we got that out there for some retirements. Is that the whole bill, or is that the one half of the bill? Because you're talking about dividing it up over 2 fiscal years.
Yes, that's not half the bill,
That's the whole bill?
No. That's the bill to get through this year. We'd still be taking some of it and pushing it into next year.
So the total bill is 300 and something?
No, I think it, I'm pulling some numbers, I think,
And won't you have retirees next year?
yes, we will.
So that's,
Yeah, so I'd have to, I don't have those figures in front of me. I know one individual is about $50,000.
you said 4 people, right, retiring?
No,
or-
I have 6. We
6.
planned for 3. I have 3 unexpected.
If I can speak on that, it looks like through sick buyback, time owed, and vacation, which will be the areas in the line item that will run short for retirees, we're budgeted a total of those 3, approximately $235,000, where we're gonna be, the total coming up to $436,500 is what we're gonna end up actually spending for retirees.
I'm sorry, John, 400 and
$436,500.
436? And you're thinking about dividing the 436 over 2 years?
No, out of the 6, one retiree has elected to
Delay?
wait till July,
Okay.
the next fiscal year. Another retiree has elected to take 50% now and 50 in the next fiscal year.
So, so the 436 is then for these 6 people?
Correct. So with a breakdown, really what it comes down to is that with our budget, we're going to be short approximately $202,000. And we're going to be asking for 168. That's what we're going to need.
Plus this 200.
Correct.
What about the 50?
Yes, for
So
for
250,
vehicles.
so 250 and 168, that's 418 for the remainder of the year. And the free cash balance is 500. Just saying. We're in agreement on the numbers? 418?
John, I'll defer to you on that.
418?
Yeah.
Okay. So we can add that to the list of the other, so we're 168 plus 50, so we've got another 218 in newly identified expenditures needed for this fiscal year. And the mayor has said that he's got other spots, so we'll be hearing from him, I'm sure, shortly, as to where we'll be taking these from, because can't go to free cash, right, because we know the number's 500, so that runs out. Okay. I guess, some of the other questions that I guess I had, which is just why I mentioned about a management consultant or somebody to help with some of these deployment or best practice issues and some of these things is I know, Lord knows we have more crime here, so we have to have more officers, but I'm just, I had a chance to really go through some of the local services reports because, what else do I have to compare? Us versus other communities and I'm looking at Chicopee and they're spending, $3 million less than we are. Westfield is $5 million less than we are. And I'm just wondering, these they don't seem to have the same problems we have budgetary wise. None of these departments are running at 12,238,000, and I don't know, does Chicopee have less officers than us?
No, but I would say they have different collective bargaining agreements.
So isn't that your job to fix those?
I've been here every year.
You and the mayor? Isn't that what you guys get
Every
paid to
year,
do?
I provide my list to the city solicitor's office on negotiation on those contracts, every year.
Right. So, I mean, I guess just taxpayers, and I'm looking at, everybody, because the business, Lord knows, we hear from the Chamber of Commerce, gotta get them rates down. We're anti-business, we're anti-everybody, we're anti-homeowner, we're we tax everything that moves around here, right? And my point is that let's do these crosstown comparisons, and when you look and our budget, it's not just your department, yours is one of the biggest examples, because it's so big, it's that scale, the police. But, it's just like across the board, our spending in this town for services is just so much more than our neighboring communities. And what's happening is they have a pool of resources of taxes to cover it. So my point is, business as usual. That's one of the things I've mentioned is I'm going to enforce 12,238,000. I'm only one vote out of 15. In 2 years, maybe I'll be one vote out of 13. Who knows? But the fact of the matter is how do we make this work and not get to the point where, we're taking people off the street and, no one's going to, so it's like I'm going to be spending 12 million too, and I don't have police coverage either. So it's like, huh? It just seems that these other communities, what are they doing that we're not? Maybe the answer is our people just get paid way more. I don't know. I don't know if that's true, but apparently that's the answer.
Well, I would say you'd have to look at the collective bargaining agreements, you'd have to look at the staffing levels, and if you compare us to Westfield or Chicopee, I would tell you that their challenges are not the same as ours.
No, I get that.
And we would love to have, obviously, their tax base to work from. We don't have that.
Right, yeah.
I can tell you that there's collective bargaining agreements that I'm restricted to work within, and I only have X number of officers. And the reality is 94% of my budget's personnel costs. If I have less officers, my overtime goes up. If I keep with the same level of police service. If I have more officers, my overtime goes down, but that drives up the bottom line of whatever that number is, 12 million, 13 million, it drives that number up. I've looked at this, and I can tell you, in a perfect world, and I know we don't live in the perfect world, if I had 98 officers, I'd really nix the overtime. But I don't have 98 officers. It'd be great if I did, but I don't have that.
The question is, would that save us money? I don't know. Maybe you could prepare a report for us that shows city councilors, mayor, you need to hire 8 more officers, and the net is, I'll save you this money. I'd be open to that.
Okay.
Why wouldn't I be open to that? My thing here is, that was my whole logic on why came around to listening to the leadership of the 2 unions to support the Quinn bill. I said, what's the deal? They said, we can manage this department a lot better. You give us the Quinn bill. This is very important to us. Great. Okay, so you have Quinn bill. But they said there's no reason we can't operate on 12,238,000. You know what? So that means you got to save in other areas. And what I'm looking for is something other that is innovative, that shows us that you can, in fact, because this is going to be your budget for quite a while. I mean, absent us having some escalating ceiling. Now, the mayor thinks that's right around the corner. I'm of the opinion that is not right around the corner. Okay, this is a bridge. Just keep taking it from stabilization. It's a bridge to happier days, and it's all going to turn around. I don't share that view. I think it's going to be the gains that we will see are going to be very incremental. All right, I don't think there's going to be some massive infusion of the tax base coming. So the fact of the matter is your department poised to handle its fiscal responsibilities, not just for this 6 months, but are you poised to handle your budget for the next 2 years, 3 years? What structurally are we doing to make sure you can manage on 12,238? And the reason why your expenses have to be the same, your revenue is the same, right? We have no more money to give you. And if we were to agree to give you these requests as you have outlined them, that puts your budget over 12,238,000. So once again, you can't stay at level funding, right?
Well, Counselor, I'm also dealing with I had shortages that I have to fill. If I don't fill the shortages on the shifts over the summer, I have to worry about what goes out on the street, so I have to fill those, which cost money. I also, we go back to the collective bargaining agreements, good, bad, or indifferent, I have to work within them. Part of that number is a 2% pay raise for everybody across the board. Good, bad, or indifferent, that influences it. At the end of the day, I got so many coppers. Whatever the number is, 12 million, 12, 238, 13, doesn't matter. I have X number of cops, and when their costs go up, or whatever their costs go up, and my budget doesn't increase, that means I have to do less cops. And when I do less cops, that means I have to shift personnel, which means services. That's all. I can't put as many cops on the road. So whatever that is, or in different divisions within the police department, or I try to shift them to stem some of this overtime.
Yeah, the answer is you have to reduce overtime. That's really one of the few pots you have. You have to reduce it. Thus far, it's not being reduced. So you already know the answer. The answer is you have to reduce overtime, so reduce it. Whatever you have to do to reduce it, reduce it. That's the bottom line, right? You have a fixed budget. And the reason why we have to enforce your fixed budget is elementary, right? Otherwise, I have to now take from DPW to give to you. Or I have to take from the school department and give to you. Or I have to take from fire department and give to your department. We're not doing, everybody's on level funding, right? So that's not fair because you guys are providing a tremendous service, but so aren't all these other departments. I like having my trash picked up. I like having plowed streets. Those come in handy, you know? So all of this thing is symbiotic and it needs to work together. And I just don't know how real level funding is. And maybe I don't know, I'm only one, but hopefully others will continue to message this to you too, is that, you know, we have to stay on level funding. That's it. You've got this. And if that means we're going to, whatever that 50,000 thing is, it only becomes 25 when we fix one less car or we do whatever. Maybe we put it into the capital plan. You have to buy another car here or there or whatever, however we're going to work it. But level funding, that has to be a departmental priority. Yeah, go ahead.
If I may, I agree with you about level funding. Like the chief said, we started off underfunded in our budget, and you're talking about the 12,238 number, by asking for the additional 200 and the 50 for vehicle repairs, that would leave us like 12,000 over budget of what we budgeted for the year. We didn't forecast these other retirees, which is the additional money. So if you look at the real numbers, we're on budget. We're 12,000 over with the 200.
Right, and I agree with you. So just trim the 12, and I can support that. I'm in favor of your 200,000 overtime because again, I am not going to micromanage how you run the department. I'm just saying, me, Kevin Jourdain, have a position that level funding is 12,238. That's where you were last year. That's what I'm going to give you this year. I'm not going to try and slice into. You're paid. You guys are paid. You know the running a department better than I do. That's for damn sure. But my point is, that's where it stops. 12,238. I'm happy to give you 12,238. It's just not a dollar more because now I'm robbing other departments to give you that. That's all. That's my only point.
Thank you, Counselor.
Yeah.
Linda, you had a question?
Yes, I guess I have a question, because if we take the numbers that you've mentioned, we come up to 12.4, and I'm totally on the level funding thing, and I'm really disappointed we don't have a plan in front of us that shows us from you guys how we're getting to the 12.4, because we've been talking about this since last April. So it's not like this is a new conversation. And so I'm comfortable with the level funding, but I don't see where this is going to end up level funded, because I'm looking at the 168, that's a must pay. So I hear what Counselor Jourdain is saying, give you the 200 for overtime, but I can't in good conscience vote for $200,000 for overtime when I know you have $168,000 that you must pay the retirees. You don't have a choice. And yes, you were surprised. And sometimes budget things don't come out exactly as we budget them. But if you can't make adjustments on a $12 million budget, there's a lot of departments that have had to make bigger adjustments on less. I think it's just a matter of fairness, and I don't see where we're gonna be able to say no to the 168 on the pensions. That's just, we must pay that.
No, we have a
They
legal obligation to pay
They
it.
retire, we must pay it, so.
What we gotta
there's
find
your
out is, did the
budget.
12,238 last year include the pension? Because I'm assuming you had retirees last year, right? You have retirees every year, right? If that included retirees, then you're right. Then that 12,238 includes their retiree funding, which is the 168. But if last year's didn't, then I want to be fair and, you know,
Well,
Add retirees, we took
through
them
the
out.
chair, if I may.
yeah.
To your point, to be fair is, there's X amount of dollars in the pot. We have $500,000 left in free cash. Fair is, we don't spend more than that money that we have, because we all know the only other place we have to go is the stabilization fund. We know, sitting here in front of us, we must pay the 168,000. So that leaves us the difference between that and the 200,000 to keep the police department level funded. That's the math.
So what you're saying, there's only about 70 more left to
Right.
level funding.
That's the math. The numbers don't lie. I mean, they just are what they are, and the money in free cash is the money in free cash.
Yeah, I'll go over the numbers in a minute.
All
Joe,
right.
You had a question?
Chief, Johnny, thank you. First of all, just thanks for the conceptual plans you laid on the table this evening and the idea of trying to curtail some of the cost that the police department endures. I think we understand why and appreciate the efforts to reduce, especially in the area of overtime. Chief, I hope if you haven't, you will in the near future, they'll talk to our new DA and make sure they're keeping a curb on the courtroom costs. They're certainly not as significant as the other overtime, but it does add up, and most DAs have been helpful in that area, but the DA has to reach out to Holyoke District Court, in our case, and make sure that they're not calling in for unnecessary officers necessary for testifying, but unnecessary sometimes when they could be avoided. And it happens, not by no means negligently, but sometimes just it happens where it slips through the cracks. It's one area you can also save. I think the semantics, I think you made some good issues here this evening. Well, before I say what I have to say is, Johnny, you seem to have the retirement buyback figures. Those are we know they're going to be every year, but they're also one-time costs. They're not part of an operational budget other than they do come out of your budget. It's like, buying cruisers. They're one-time costs, but we know we have to do it every year. We don't know exactly when the cruiser's going to run, time's going to run up, but we know it is going to run up. We don't know exactly when the officer's going to retire, but we do know they're going to retire. Do you factor in savings, and Kevin just said a second ago, do you factor in savings when a higher paying officer goes out the door and is replaced by a lower paying officer? It has to have a positive impact on the budget in that way.
I wouldn't say we factor in the savings in that respect. What gets factored in when you budget out the next year, X number of officers. I can tell you that the overtime rate is based on, it's not just time and a half. It's time and a half plus longevity, plus Quinn. So, I have 117, 118 of us, and there's like 116 people at different rates of pay.
Okay. But if that's an ongoing calculation, I think you might see a trend as people retire, we hire someone at a starting level, obviously,
Right.
and the benefits aren't as great. And I know there's training costs, but at the same time, I think it usually works out, because there's a time frame when the position is not even filled.
Well, in the other area we're seeing savings, even though it's the elephant in the room, so to speak, is the Quinn bill. The number comes down, but please realize we have an education incentive bill that creeps up. Not as high as the Quinn bill, but it was to replace the Quinn bill. So there is a fading of that. Not fast enough, I think, for everybody's likings, but there is a fading of it. I think we're down to, I'm pulling this one out of the air, somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 850, John?
But it's going to fluctuate, because if someone gets promoted, that number could go the opposite way for the remainder of that individual's career, but that's fine. I mean, eventually it'll go away. If there's any way to negotiate it quicker, that would be fine too, but I for one, understand, the issue and have taken my position. The other area that I think we're all making a mistake, or maybe not, I shouldn't say mistake, but is if we're going to sit here and say level fund, don't say level service. It's not the same. Never has been, can't be. Insurance has gone up, 2% increase on salaries has gone up. The cost of everything you do goes up. Level fund is not level service. So if you're going to live with a level fund budget, it's time to put it on the table, and this is to the city council too, it's time to make cuts. Not budget cuts, cuts in the ordinance. That's the only way you're going to save money to let level fund pay for what it is. But as the chief said, it's going to be cuts in service if you want to make those proposals. There is another way to get revenue. It's called the sewer rate. $1 million a year to off-pay the sewer department, that's a user fee enterprise? Come on.
Okay, any other questions? Chief?
I just wanted to make,
Yeah, go ahead.
oh, yeah. One observation, by the way, on the Quinn bill, and again, I've taken my position as well, but is anything that your department goes down, it just picks up over in the pension fund, right? Because as soon as they retire, whatever they were receiving, your department doesn't pay it anymore, but we have to pay it out of the pension fund liability, because they go over and they get out of their high three, included their Quinn bill. So that bill just goes over there, just so you know. It just shifts from your department over there. City-wise, it's revenue neutral,
Thank you, and if I'm,
just so you know.
and I could be mistaken, but I believe our pension fund is doing very well. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, to the extent we're now only 156 million short, yeah, it's doing great. But depends what your expectation is. I personally think 156 million shortfall is not too great. But, that was last year. We had a decent stock market last year. So far this year, not so much. So we'll see what this year brings. I don't know about your portfolio, but mine's certainly down. Wanted to ask you a question about dispatcher overtime. Seemed like there was a lot there. Was that me? Is this an anomaly, or is that about the same usually most years?
We went down to 10 dispatchers. 12 dispatchers is our full contingent. We had gone down to 10 dispatchers.
Okay.
I have to have 2 dispatchers working every shift. If someone's off, we have to backfill.
Sure. Okay. So have we filled the other 2 positions now, or?
We have.
Okay. So that we should hopefully see a trend line downwards of overtime now that you have your full complement of people?
I would certainly hope so.
Okay. All right, great.
All right, just for the numbers, for the free cash account, we took out a couple items, so it went down to 529,358. Now, if you add in the overtime plus the 5,000 for advertising that we just approved tonight, you're gonna, and if we do the 100,000 overtime for the fire department, which we know is locked up right now, that'll get you down to 223,667. That's if we pass, tonight was the 5,000, if we take on this as well as the overtime for fire, which we know is there. So that would be your free cash account as of, just call it tonight, if you approve it all. When we got into this with the stabilization account, I filed an order to say, let's bring all the department heads in, bring them in for what's your shortfalls. An email went out immediately after that saying, you don't have to go. Lo and behold, 168,000 for retirees, which I know is not your fault. It happens. We ask, can you forecast, and you do the best, and the number's a number. Cars, we knew we were going to be a problem. Maintenance is going to be a problem because we don't have a fleet. We haven't really replenished it in 3 years. I fought for 4. We ultimately got 3 through funding we found somewhere else, another 50,000. Now, we're seeing you with the shortfalls because you're in here actually telling us some. Fire's telling us they might have shortfalls. We learned from the clerk's office, elections are going to have shortfalls. What other departments are going to have shortfalls? We don't know. Goes back to the number, 223,667. If my math is correct, it'd be off, be up by $1. That's the reality of it. So it's not micromanaging. It's not telling you what to do. It's not politics. It's the number. If you have 223,667 after it's all said and done, and other departments flood in and say, hey, look, we had shortfalls too. We can't fund it. Plus, my favorite one is we really just got lucky. No snow.
Yeah.
If that snowstorm hit here, what's the average cost that we went through last year? We actually dipped into stabilization to cover that cost. I mean, these are all facts. You don't have to look too far in the history to see it. So to me, I'm not saying, level fund because I want to cut services, level fund because I don't support police and I don't want public safety. Everyone in this room, do a poll. We all want public safety. It was nice to see that article after we said no to the 200,000, that crime is down. I mean, that was a coincidence, I thought. Let's get serious. If there is no money, what are we going to do? And that's been the ongoing question. I'm not telling you, you have to do what I say for micromanaging your department. I'm just realistically looking at numbers. If there's no money, what do you do? Now, the easiest answer that we've been hearing for the last several years is stabilization. Stabilization. It's like a record. Which then I said, fine, let's stop that argument. Let's bring in bond counsel. She has no ties here other than to just give a straight answer. She stood right there and said, look good so far, but you're not growing. You're not bringing in revenue. And if you keep touching this account without a plan, can't guarantee what's going to happen to your rating. Which then really just, you're done for a city. If your bond's gone, if everything falls apart, your stabilization account, you just keep depleting it till it's zero, well, okay, then you have some problems. All we've realistically asked is, knowing these problems here, until we start getting the growth, we start bringing the business, what can we do? That's all we've ever asked. And then we get you're challenging public safety, you're challenging services. Never said that. Just asked for help. Went to the fire department, they wanted 200,000 last year. We said, can you give us 100? Granted, I hate brownouts. I don't want brownouts. That's one option they came up with, and they're trying, and they're showing us some costs. At least they showed us something. Last time we met, I said, what plan do you have? Now we're here, well, there's a step. Step one would be going to shift personnel, some day watch changes, community policing, we're going to take that back, put it into regular shifts, adjust hours. Captain Duguay gave Kevin something.
Right, what Captain Duguay gave me is something her and I have been working on for a few months, which will be going to ordinance. You guys will all be privy to it. That's basically a series of revenue generating things that we should be doing, which would generate new revenue. No particular number as to how much, dollar signs. And again, we have to be somewhat sensitive to the fact that we don't create new laws and penalties for the purposes of generating new revenue. But the thing that she's mostly focused on is more of the city and state distribution of fines. And Denise is right that by the way we handle our code books, a lot of these things could be coming to the city as opposed to splitting them 50-50 with the state. So anyways, that was the proposal Denise worked on with me, and that's something I'm going to be submitting at a meeting and sending in the ordinance.
All right,
But,
so we have a potential revenue raiser on that end
yeah,
for
that would help.
not over excessive fees, but some type of adjustment.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Okay, and that's fine. I guess my question, Chief, is when we set up the shifts, how are the shifts set up?
I got 3 shifts, days, evenings, mids.
All right, so days, evenings, and the night shift, so call it ABC. How many on each shift?
At the moment, I got 21 on midnights. I think it's 17 and 17 on days and evenings.
So 17, 17, 21?
No, I'm sorry, 21 on evenings, 17 on midnights and days.
And for the day shift of the 17, 4 are your captains.
No, they're not included in that number.
Okay, so walk me through the numbers on who's on each
That's the
shift.
patrol division.
Okay, so patrol is 17, 17, 21, that's just patrolman. And then what other staff is on?
So I have, then I have detectives working days and nights. I have, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, hang on, I got 7 detectives during the day. 1 does forensics, 2 are really court officers. I have,
So 2 detectives are just court officers?
yes,
Okay.
you know, we make 3,000 arrests a year, and they're busy. I have 4 detectives on the night watch. 4 to 12s. Then I have 9 detectives in narcotics. I have a couple supervisors in narcotics that are, one's out injured. I have a supervisor in regular detectives during the evening. And then I have looks like 5 supervisors on midnights, 4 or 5 on days, 4 or 5 on evenings, subject to change due to some injuries and transfers.
So 4 captains is my question on the day shift.
That's correct, and that is accurate. One other thing, as we're looking at the, pots of money and such, we actively go after grants to try and supplement some of these services, whether it be traffic grants, whether it be community policing grants, to put additional resources or to try to fill the voids that have been created out there. And we actually cleaned up some old grants that were sitting on the books. Last year, we returned $308,000 into free cash last year off of old grants that were just sitting there. And at the end of the day, we provide the best services we can with the resources we have, and we will continue to do that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can anyone grab as much overtime as they want, or can you say to someone, you've had a ridiculous amount of overtime this year, at a ridiculous pay, I've got to give it to somebody else?
Well, overtime's based on, the supervisors do it a little differently than the patrolmen do it. But it's put out there and to be as evenly as distributed as possible. We have some officers, if you look at the things that make $1,000 or a couple $1,000, don't make a lot of overtime, which probably means for the most part they're working parade weekend or celebration Holyoke, that sort of thing. Then we have officers making more money. I have officers that work a lot, but they work when other officers won't work. And I have officers that work very little or don't want to work. The overtime, that is. So, and then there are different times of the year when we've had 100 jobs a month, extra detail jobs we can't fill. So it's really to the officer. If he or she wants to hustle, they can.
One thing on the numbers, just to be clear too. See now the 168 is going to be a mandatory payment. Let's assume it has to come from free cash because somehow there's mysterious money everywhere else. That will get you in if you add in the 50,000 for cars, because you actually do need cars to cover the shifts. So 218, subtract that out, you're down to $5,667. Just rough numbers.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
Thanks. So we heard that the road detail account was getting high again after there'd been a lot of work done to reduce it. How are the payments, what are we owed on road details at this point?
Just give me a second, I just gotta find my notes here. Yeah. I just did this too, with Katie, just sat down with Katie on this. I apologize, I just had some notes, I ran some notes on this. So I'm gonna shoot from the hip a little bit here. If I can't seem to find my notes.
Well, a rough
Yeah,
number,
so, we were, we bill out, I don't know, 40, 50 period, sometimes 100 a month. We're probably 120 in the rears.
It's a chunk.
Well, not when you're billing out 50, 100 a month, and you give 30, 60 days to get in. So we have had some old debt that I think at one point, I can't recall what the number off the top of my head is. Katie, my bookkeeper, aggressively went after some old debt that incurred before she got there. She was able to reclaim $15,000 that we didn't have. The rest of it, she referred to the law department. Some of it is businesses that are no longer there. We do have one outstanding bill with Pan Am that's at the law department right now. Everybody's pointing fingers. Mass DOT, Pan Am, and some contractor are all doing one of these things as who's going to pay that bill. But that outstanding bill is over at the law department. It's in the neighborhood of $18,000.
And if I may, after speaking with Katie, she explained to me, as far as that number that you guys see sometimes isn't really reflective of a true number, just based on deposits and that she gives to the treasurer's office. Sometimes the treasurer's office holds on to those deposits until, let's say, the end of the month. Sometimes they deposit them as soon as they get them, so sometimes that 121 or 120,000, which is a monthly kind of like rotating balance for a 30 and 60-day period. So we've been pretty consistent in getting the bills in. Another issue that we've talked about before, Kevin, is the responsibility of the vendors who don't pay their bills, and them being allowed to rebid on a job prior to paying a bill, an outstanding bill. Whose responsibility is that to stop these vendors from bidding again?
I thought we had agreed in those situations, if somebody had an outstanding bill, that the police were not gonna send anybody.
That's correct. We do have a no-call list, and we do have, if you're a small vendor coming in from the outside for the first time, that we're not familiar with you,
Right.
pay up front.
Yeah, and that's the way to do it, yeah.
Right, but as far as allowing them to bid on new jobs,
A new construction project he's referring to for the,
Oh, I see what you're saying. Other, like, I'm gonna go do, like, I'll get the contract to do sidewalks or something.
right, and we still owe the police department X amount of dollars and we haven't paid them.
The city should have a lien on it and just take it right off the top of the new bill.
Yeah, that's, you know what, I have to meet with Dave Martins pretty soon. I'll ask him about how we can connect the dots on that, because that would be a good, that's a good point, you know, how are we policing that and enforcing that? Because we don't give you special permits and different things here, right? Or licenses and things if you owe back taxes or all these other different things, so I agree. If somebody stiffed us on a bill, they shouldn't get the next highway paving job. Unless they pay.
Just so I can follow up. So a better question that I might have asked would have been, is it current or is it old? So if the 120,000 is current, and it's within the reasonable pay frame, then it would seem everything is good. But I'm just cautious because we went down that path before.
How much is over, like, what's your AR on that? Like, how much is over 180 days delinquent?
The only one I'm guessing is the 18,000 from Pan Am.
Who's Pan Am, by the way? What is that company?
Railroad,
Railroad? Okay.
and I guess our last payment from them last spring was in the neighborhood of 48,000.
But you know what, though, John, just as I'm thinking about this more, if I go to bid on the next sidewalk job, road job, whatever it is, how am I gonna get cops because I'm required to have security detail at those jobs, right? If I can't get HPD to do it because I stiffed them on the last one, basically, I'm not gonna be able to really do that work in Holyoke anymore.
Or you can get a new contractor.
Oh, you mean, so the bill is coming in from the subcontractors, or in like the general contractor maybe
Right.
stiffed us, and they'll have some sub that orders up the police detail? So they're trying to circumvent it then? We'll have to have that policed a little bit, we'll have to check with procurement.
Thanks for coming down, Chief and John, and I really appreciate your efforts here to try to reduce costs. And I know it's not easy trying to keep things in line as last year, as your costs have gone up with the contract, actually. And tonight, the only thing in front of us is the 200,000, right? I mean, I know there's forecast things for the 50 and the 168. Now, you stated the 168, that's for retirements that weren't expected.
That's correct.
Out of that 168, you said somebody's going to defer till next fiscal year.
No, that's including the 168.
That's including it.
That number would be larger if they didn't defer.
Okay, because you have money in there now for the other
3.
retirees.
Yes,
Enough to cover those 3.
3, but not 6.
Okay. But out of that, so in other words, you still need the 168. That's with
Deferments.
deferments for next year, and one person saying they're not going to take anything?
Correct,
And one to take 50%?
correct.
Okay. So that's something that's going to be coming up within the next 2 months? Or
Yes,
sooner?
Yes.
I mean, it's not next week or the
No.
week after?
No, but yes.
Okay.
They're looking to go out in the spring.
Okay, so what we have to look at tonight is just the 200,000.
Correct.
Okay, and with that money gone, we're down to what, you say? 300,000? With the 200,000 gone? 329,000, 322,000? With the 5,000 tonight?
It's the 323,667.
323?
He took out the 100 theoretically for the fire, which made it 223,667.
Okay, and the fire is later on too. It could be next month or, and the fire was that overtime or is that the other thing with the SAFER grant? Just the overtime?
Just overtime. The SAFER grant, based on the article, the only thing
Yeah.
information from reading the paper is they took it from long-term
Tax,
debt.
long-term debt or something, yeah. That was extra that was budgeted from the treasurer's office, was it, or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the budget for them.
Okay. So in other words, that's, I mean, and your plan basically is what you stated here tonight, and then as Kevin said, and anybody here, we're not gonna micromanage. You know the police department, you know how to run the police department better than anybody. You've done it for 34 years. And that's the money that you need to get to the end of the year for all your overtime.
That's correct.
Court,
That's
your road
correct.
jobs, everything.
That's correct.
Okay. And if that doesn't get approved, what happens?
More shifting of personnel, more moving bodies back, more reduction in services.
And I know you stated earlier, if you had more officers, the overtime would go down, but your cost, in effect,
Would
will
go
go up.
up, because yes, you'd have to pay the salaries and.
Salaries and the benefits that, so I know that's a tricky line that, you gotta walk, because, you gotta pay that extra in benefits and salaries, This year, is there any money in your budget anywhere that can be transferred out to people that aren't working right now, or the people that will retire, that's budgeted?
Any savings that we get, if people, retire in the spring, we've already factored that into these numbers.
Oh, that is factored in?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
That's a question, Mr. Chairman. So how much did you budget for retirements for this year? Do you recall?
John,
I don't happen to have your budget handy. I didn't look at the buyback lines.
I think I said it was, I'm not sure what we actually budgeted, but what we approved for was,
Yeah, what was the approved amount for your buyback?
230 something, I believe. I gave it to you.
Of your budget?
Yeah, what was approved, was 234,470.
234
Total, when
for
you,
your buybacks?
when you figure buybacks, you also have to figure in the holiday and longevity. There's enough in those line items to cover all of these retirees. However, the three main ones, the sick buyback, time owed, and vacation, are gonna be short. But the total of those three budgeted was 234,470.
All right, let me get to your page. Oh, okay. I'll be gentle, Peter.
And if I may just add,
So you said, so hold on a minute. You said you budgeted 238, and if I understood you correctly, we're gonna spend 168.
no.
On top of that, so 234, 470.
But you said the whole bill was 400 and
What was
something.
approved for the budget for
For buyback.
what we had predicted in doing this budget, this year's budget, was 234,470. That's what was approved.
Yeah, okay. And you said the total was 400 and something.
436,587, correct.
But of the 436, you're only gonna spend 168.
That's
Because
what
the
we're
rest
gonna-
of it's gonna be deferred to next year.
Negative. 168 is what's gonna be needed. I can give you,
So you're gonna need all of this plus 168.
right.
So you are spending 400. So what's the deferred part?
The deferred part of the two officers, it's gonna be right around 100,000 for next year that we're gonna have to plan.
So the
for
total
next
was
year's budget.
500 and something
That's correct.
on 6 people?
That's correct.
That's your collective bargaining thing again, right? I mean, when you're gonna have to get a handle of that. How are you gonna support as a budget, giving every time somebody leaves, we're gonna pay $100,000 a person out? How do you support that as a budget, These, I mean, does that sound unusual to anybody? Or is that just me? Does that sound good? I mean, is that high? 100,000 a person when you leave a job? So, my point is, we gotta get a control over that. We're paying you and the mayor to take care of these every 3 years, right? You've been here, I don't know, 4 years now. So we need you guys to get your arms around some of that. These 100,000 a person buyouts, I mean, either that or if we know how many people are coming in each year, just look at it over a 5-6 year period, you gotta make sure these are sufficiently budgeted.
Counselor,
It's a massive unfunded liability inside your department.
Counselor, I can appreciate that, but part of that goes back to the collective bargaining agreements. I didn't put these packages together, I have to live with them.
I understand, but, we're gonna have to have conversations among everybody involved we gotta be reasonable with each other, you know?
Well, we've been discussing that, and, you know, like we said, we don't have a crystal ball. We can't forecast and say X amount of people are gonna be retiring
You kinda
within a
do though,
budget.
John, you
But
kinda can.
What we do is we go around and we ask those people within that timeframe, 30 years and plus, and we do go around and ask them, what are their plans? What, are they gonna be doing it this year? Some say no. Well, guess what? We asked those people, and those three said no when we made up this budget. So I don't know what the formula should be. Should we take people from 30 years and plus and add those to every budget? You know, that number's gonna be astronomical. You know, so we have to find a happy medium in order to not fall into these situations.
Correct, but my suggestion is, friendly suggestion is, you take a look back over a 5, 6, 7-year period backwards and say, on average, how many people have retired each year? At least if I was doing the budget, that's what I would do. And if the average was 6 people a year retire, then guess what my budget would be calculated on 6 people retiring? Now, I might be off 1, I might gain, right, this year only 4 left, or I might be 8, but if everybody's getting 100,000 a year on the way out the door, and I only got 200 in the budget, you know, we're averaging more than 2 retirements a year. So that's, you know, when, let's see, for the buybacks, the mayor gave you actually more than you requested, and we approved the mayor's number. So that 230-something number, that wasn't cut down. That was an exact, so somebody came up with the number, 2 people retiring. But it ended up being 6 people leaving. Now luckily, some of these guys are doing you a favor, probably for tax reasons and otherwise. They're deferring into future years, you know, because they don't want all the money at once, so they don't get hammered tax-wise. So there is some pecuniary benefit to them too, in splitting some of these payments. But the reality is we're not budgeting enough for that.
So, and what I can say is you're talking about retirement buyouts that are in the contracts. Every time this comes up, every contract that comes up, I think the standard response is you got 2 sides of the table. One side wants to reduce that number. The other side says, I have it, give me something for it. The city, you know, and they never meet anywhere in the middle. And then you and I are having this conversation about these buyouts that I have no control over.
I know, but I'm just letting you know that you know, you say to yourself, what happened in Detroit? How did Detroit end up in bankruptcy court? This is how Detroit ended up in they gave out benefits that they couldn't afford. Your department cannot support $100,000 buyouts to every single person. So some tough conversations need to start happening between the mayor and all the people that are empowered to, we can't just say, well, that's the problem. It's this, you know, 100-pound gorilla or 800-pound gorilla nobody can address. We've got to start thinking out of the box as to, maybe we need to give out something or whatever. We need to start doing these. I'm just saying, the reality is that's going to blow your budget, because even though we're kicking okay, so we're going to pay 200, and let's just say we gave you the 168, we're still deferring another 100 or 200 into next year. So that means fiscal 17's on top of anybody else that's going to retire, they're 200 in the hole already.
100.
Or 100.
Roughly 100.
Yeah, that's, I mean, all this stuff is going to catch up to us real soon. We're already seeing it, and it's, you know, I know Joe, you know, and I see eye to eye on the overall picture as well, but, you know, the fact of the matter is when we say level funding, I don't know, you're right, maybe that does mean less hours, it means less service. It just means what it means. It means you have X dollars coming in, and we're going to put out the best police force we can with those dollars. I guess that's all we can do, you know? And so be it. I mean, unless someone's got a printing press, this is all the money we can give you. I just don't think it's realistic for us to say, like, I could agree to give you $238,000. Your budget right now, budgeted from the council, is $12 million. Your level funding for last year was $12,238. However you want $238, I will give that to you. If it's 200 and then something, but you, as far as I'm concerned, it's 12,238. That's me. Because otherwise, what I'm doing is, I'm robbing it from other departments who are just as worthy to have money as your department to give it more than that. That's, to my opinion, you know?
Thanks. So back, I want to say about 3 years ago, and maybe it was longer than that, we had the big debate about the Quinn bill. And during that debate, part of the debate was, we have choices to make. We can spend money on non-personnel, boots on the ground, activities, programs, and benefits, or we can direct the money toward the people on the ground. At that time, the mayor came before the council and said that is in the arena of the mayor to sit and deal with the contract with the police. It's not the council's arena to do that. So we
Negotiate, we can't.
Pardon?
We can't negotiate.
Right, so we were basically informed that we were exceeding our legislative authority relative to the discussions around the Quinn bill. But that was the point on the table at the time. And now we're here, and the contracts are the contracts. We can't negotiate them. We have no ability to negotiate them or authority to. And so as you're sitting there saying you have to live with it, who's at the table, we have to live with it, and we can't be at the table. But we don't have the money. And there were those of us who said, we can see it coming that we're not going to have the money because of the path we'd been on for 10 years that was not sustainable. So now we're here, and the only thing we have left to talk about is giving money to the people. We must give the $168,000 to the retirees. So it's semantics to talk about giving $200,000 for overtime, and then we're not gonna give them any more. We must somehow find the money to pay for the retirees. So we're only fooling ourselves if we say yes to $200,000 for overtime, because we know we have the fiduciary responsibility to pay the $168,000. It's not an option.
You're right. So what if
So-
we gave you the 168, can you live on 70,000 overtime? What are you gonna do? That's all that's left is be 70 grand for overtime.
We'll be shifting resources.
There's,
That's the reality. We'll be shifting
don't have
resources
the
around
you know,
to plug holes. That's what's gonna happen.
That's, I mean, I'm not,
So,
here's my issue. This could have all been vetted a month and a half ago. We invited everyone else to come in and just put everything out on the table and deal with it. And I'm sorry, you're here taking the brunt of it. At least you showed up. Nothing. You didn't show up. So now it's us dealing with it. To me, I'll make a motion that we refer it out to committee and let the committee deal with it. To me, you told us what you have, you told us what you can do, what you can't do, and that's that. The real issue is now, what do we have to do? Here's the overtime, deal with it, knowing full well now that there's 168,000 coming in behind it. Well, and that'll be up for debate too. In essence, are they gonna do what they did with the fire department, which is we're gonna find it from some other account that we overfunded because during the budget process, we asked about those numbers. And we need it, because that was the forecast for the long-term debt, the short-term debt, and everything else, the health insurance, everything else. Lo and behold, here comes the trickling back of, well, we found it because we overestimated. Are there other accounts that we overestimated on, which then we could use to pay for the overtime? I don't know. There's no answer. So is it an outright no to you? I don't know, because I don't have answers. Are there other accounts we can bleed out? I don't know. It's not your, chief, it's not you.
Some overtime now and see how the year goes. You know, that's the other thing is, you know,
Well, we can't, the only thing we can do on this is yes, no, or my recommendation would be refer out to the full council without recommendation.
ask the mayor to come back with a smaller number, say, if the proposal is 168, then let's get that out of the way. Bring that in so we can fund that, because those people are entitled to the money. Then come in with a proposal for 70, and then the rest of what we could do is see how the rest of the fiscal year goes, and maybe we can find another 100,000 in overtime, because one of these big accounts is running well, you know?
Yep.
They just found 300 for the fire department.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
How about if we table it till we get the other information? We only have it by hearsay right now.
That's true too. It's all hearsay. Yeah, we have time before the next meeting, so this is,
I'll offer a motion to table till we can get the rest of the information so we know what we're dealing with. From the other departments, we're hearing noise that 300,000 for the schools, 300,000 for the fire, or 400,000 plus 100. Then we're hearing there's money for it, but we don't know where. I mean, it's all smoke and mirrors. I mean, we have no facts in front of us.
Have another meeting before then?
But we need information. I mean,
no, that's why I said, instead of,
Look, we've asked for people, he's asked for people.
and they just don't. So, and that's the whole thing, they're just, so you have to work with. I'm not saying it's right, I'm just saying that's what we've been put to work with.
it's not workable.
If I may?
Yeah.
Counselors, I appreciate the time tonight. Whatever the bottom line is, my officers will do the best they can with the resources we have. I have, 116, 17, if I count myself, 116 great people that work hard every day, sworn officers. Plus, I have civilian staff that work very hard. I am very proud of our crime numbers. They're down at their lowest. We've made adjustments, and maybe in the future we bring more adjustments, and we will provide the best services we can with the budgeted money. And I appreciate the support.
All right, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve the $200,000 transfer from free cash to overtime.
Fails for lack of a second. Is there another motion?
Motion to table till we get the information from the other departments. Second.
First motion was to approve, failed for a lack of second. Second motion was to table. Seconded, all those in favor?
Aye. In writing.
What are you looking for in writing?
Chief, you're gonna bring in that
The
168.
monies that they're claiming
Yeah,
that they
we'll figure
need.
something out.
And/or if it has been stated to us that the monies are available,
Yeah, I'll try to get that over to the
where are
mayor's
they
office
coming from?
tomorrow, the next day, whatever.
What was the count on that motion?
3-1.
Oh, you did, I didn't hear you say anything. It was seconded.
I was writing.
Okay,
it's
so
yes.
you're yes with that?
It's written down right here.
Okay. I didn't hear you say anything.
Everything gets written down. All right, so motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor? All opposed?